In addition to historical accuracy, the game features fairly reliable physics. However, there is abstraction in order to make the game, actually fun. In the game, projectiles follow a ballistic arc that visually represents real naval gunnery, but the underlying physics are simplified. True naval ballistics involves complex drag coefficients, spin stabilization, atmospheric density changes, and variable propellant performances. The game renders a stable parabolic path that doesn't incorporate these environmental factors. Shell flight times are derived from reference values at approximate real muzzle velocities, but they are altered for gameplay consistency. Real shells slow significantly due to drag when in air, especially smaller calibers. The game uses compressed ballistic profiles that exaggerate or reduce this deceleration depending on balance needs. Dispersion is generated through an RNG based ellipse around the aim point. In practice, real patterns were irregular and changed throughout a battle. In-game dispersions are fixed and consistent, prioritizing gameplay fairness over physical accuracy. Environmental factors such as wind, humidity, or thermal distortion are not modeled, resulting in a static system rather than a dynamic ballistic environment. The game includes mechanisms for ricochet normalization and overmatch, which are loosely inspired by historical ballistics. However, the relationships are codified into simple thresholds. Real impact outcomes vary widely. The in-game rules provides clarity. Shots below a certain angle bounce, above it penetrate, but this omits transitional behavior and the unpredictability of real naval engagements. The game uses citadels to represent critical components such as magazines and machinery. A citadel hit delivers catastrophic damage, approximating the effect of a shell reaching vital compartments. Real damage, however, can range from partial incapacitation to essentially an explosion from a single shell, depending on charge combustion, armor deformation, and shock transmissions. The game compresses these complex outcomes into a binary system, citadel or non-citadel. Real ships consisted of watertight compartments with independent structural strengths. Damage propagated unevenly, depending on the bulkhead integrity, fire progression, and flooding configuration. In contrast, the game uses a uniform hit point pool that reduces overall survivability with each damaging hit. Compartment modules, engines, steering, turrets provide some granularity, but the majority of the hull behaves as a single damage reservoir, excluding individual hit points of specific sections of the ship. Naval shells produce internal shockwaves and destructive fragmentation even without full penetration. These effects often caused injury to the crew and damage to the equipment. The game does not simulate this effect and is assigned only if certain penetration criteria are met. The fire system is one of the most abstracted aspects of the game. Fires ignite with a probability determined by the shell caliber and type, and they inflict steady damage over fixed durations. Real fires naturally varied in intensity, spread rate, fuel source, and containment, and they could result in smoke, loss of electrical systems, crew casualties, and secondary explosions. The game offers predictable fire timers and uniform suppression tools, but this simplifies the nature of these fires. Running depth and arming distance exist conceptually, but they do not reflect real-world viability. Real-world torpedoes often experience depth-keeping failures, magnetic detonator malfunctions, and premature fusing. In the game, torpedoes always run true and detonate reliably on impact. When a torpedo hits, flooding is represented by a simple status effect that inflicts continuous damage. Real flooding was highly dependent on the impact location, the material of the hull, and the number of breach compartments, and the ship's internal water management systems. Flood water weight altered stability, list, and trim, often leading to progressive mechanical failures. In the game, flooding is linear and predictable. Real ships fought flooding aggressively, using pumps, isolation procedures, and controlled counter-flooding to maintain stability. Successful damage control could mean the difference between survival and capsizing. This game reduces this to a damage control party consumable with a fixed duration cooldown and sometimes fixed charges, followed by automated recovery. And I think in reality, if you had a bunch of dudes and you had flooding that if wasn't stopped was going to cause the ship to sink, you could probably convince people to help out.